everybody provides support immediately. What about 3 months later? What about 6 months later? What about during the holiday party?
Welcome to the Joy Powered Workspace podcast, where we help HR and business leaders embrace joy in the workplace. I'm JoDee Curtis, owner of Purple Ink, and with me is my friend and co-host Susan White, owner of Susan Tender White Consulting, an HR consulting practice. Susan is also a senior executive collaborator with Purple Ink. Our topic today is Beyond Bereavement Leave, Rethinking Grief Support as a Strategic Business Priority. Today, we're diving into this topic that's often overlooked in organizational strategy. Not just the kind that follows a personal loss, but the kind of grief that ripples through teams and workplaces after a sudden or traumatic event. Whether it's a suicide, overdose, health crisis, accident, or act of violence, the emotional toll on employees can be profound and long lasting. According to the National Safety Council, there were over 4,500 preventable work-related deaths in 2023, alongside 740 workplace homicides and suicides. While these numbers represent a slight decline from the previous year, the rate of intentional deaths remains unchanged. This is signaling a persistent crisis in workplace safety and mental health. The AFL-CIO's 2024 report, Death on the Job, The Toll of Neglect, reveals that workplace homicides and suicides rose by 9% and 13%, respectively, from 2021 to 2022. These figures are likely undercounted as many incidents go unreported or are misclassified. Industries such as construction, transportation, and agriculture continue to see the highest fatality rates, with agriculture reaching 20 deaths per 100,000 workers. Adding to this complexity is the rise in opioid-related deaths among employees. A 2025 report from Quest Diagnostics found that fentanyl positivity in random workforce drug tests was 707% higher than in pre-employment screenings. Isn't that crazy?
It's awful.
Yeah. Alarmingly, 60% of those tests also showed co-positivity with other substances like marijuana and amphetamines. These trends suggest that grief, trauma, and emotional distress may be driving substance misuse in the workplace, and often silently. So, as we may rethink bereavement leave, it's time to consider grief support, not just as a compassionate gesture, but as a strategic business priority that affects retention, productivity, and organizational trust.
Hmm.
So, what do we do when one of these tragedies impacts our own workspace? Well, we have invited a guest today, Dr. Jennifer Levin, to help us answer these questions. Dr. Levin is a nationally recognized expert in traumatic grief and sudden loss, and she helps organizations and individuals respond to unexpected loss with compassion and structure. As founder of Traumatic Grief Solutions, she provides crisis response consulting, grief leadership training, and trauma informed coaching for executives and HR leaders to reduce the long term emotional and financial costs of sudden workplace loss.
Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Jennifer, you're one of fewer than 300 mental health professionals worldwide recognized as a fellow in Thanatology. the study of death, dying, and bereavement. How or why were you attracted to this kind of a fellowship?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Actually, I think the number's gone up a little bit. I chair the application review process.
Ah,
So that fellowship comes from the Association of Death Education and Counseling, which is a national, I should say, international organization. And one of the things I love about them is that they offer these credentials, both the CT and the FT, to really recognize individuals who have expertise, knowledge, experience, education in
ah,
thanatology. And, when one of my hats is a therapist, and sometimes when you're a therapist, you have this little checkbox of, what do you specialize in? And a lot of times people will say grief and loss and
sure.
without any formal training. And so
Mm.
what really attracted me is that you have to take an exam, you have to, show all of the stuff that you've done. I learned a ton, even more when I was going through the whole process. So it's a anybody who works from any part of thanatology, I highly, highly recommend that that's something that they pursue.
I'm so glad to learn about it today. So thank you.
So
Yeah.
if you want to know more, go to the Association for Death Education and Counseling website.
Thank you.
Mm, nice. Thank you. And how does that expertise inform your work with corporations, nonprofits, educational institutions who may be facing loss in the workplace?
Yeah. Um, so I specialize in traumatic grief in the workplace. And I work a lot with HR leaders and executives as well, both in navigating a crisis that's just occurred and they don't quite know how to respond, or in helping them prepare in advance for something that may occur. And, we don't leave our personal lives at home, you
Hmm.
know, be more of that was what was expected, but it's just not realistic. And things have become so much more complicated in our world. And so my background, my knowledge really show, helps me take the feelings that business leaders and HR professionals have and put them into action. Because a lot of times we are so concerned about somebody or something horrific has happened, but we don't know what to do. We don't
Hmm.
want overreact. We don't want to underreact. We don't want to say the wrong thing. So we don't do anything at all. And, sending a card or flowers is helpful, but this grief lasts a really long time. And one of the things I like to say is grief doesn't even begin until after bereavement leave. Because when you go
Mm.
out for bereavement leave, you are making arrangements and dealing with logistics, and you're just kind of in this numb, chaotic, depending on whatever the circumstances are. And it's not really till you go back into your life that you have to learn how to live with grief. And that shows up
Mm.
in the
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, I think that's really profound, right? That the new normal. How do you go on? So, Jennifer, you wrote a book, the Traumatic Loss Workbook, and it focuses specifically on the impact of a sudden or unexpected loss. What makes this kind of grief different from the other types of loss?
again, I'm so glad you asked that, because anyone who's experienced a sudden or unexpected death often feels so isolated that other people don't understand why their death
Mm.
of their person was different. So there's several things. One, there's often not an opportunity to say goodbye. It
Mm.
happens suddenly. And, in the workplace, it's like, wait, my colleague was just here yesterday. Now they're gone.
Mm.
So there's, no opportunity. Many times it's out of the natural life cycle. So it'll happen to somebody who's younger. I'll hear things like they had 3 kids, a family, all of that. And so that just makes it very, very different. Many
Mhm.
times prevented. If it's a suicide, I deal with so much in the workplace. If it's an accident, if it's an overdose, many of those things could be prevented at some level. And, there's unexpected health crises, heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, maybe not so much. But so knowing, oh my gosh, if I had done something differently, and we go into that cycle, I just gave a talk on shame, blame, and guilt after sudden and unexpected death. So we have those types of things. Many times the loved one or the person we cared about suffered, the
Mm,
death, the circumstances. And so having to live with that. And then
mm,
it's traumatic in the way that it happens. And again, depending on the individual circumstances, the person who was involved, the loved one, the survivor, may experience symptoms of trauma afterwards. And whether we're talking rumination, thinking about things over and over, hypervigilance, always being on the edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop, flashbacks, nightmares,
mhm,
all of those feeling unsafe in the world, which is happens because the assumptions that something called the theory of shattered assumptions have been shattered. And so it completely impacts every aspect of your life when you've had a sudden or unexpected death because these things are so different and it
mhm.
shows up in the workplace. Any
Wow.
death in the workplace, your mom dies,
Sure.
your pet dies, it shows up in the workplace, but
Mhm.
especially after something that's happened sudden or unexpectedly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Jennifer, what are some of the emotional and financial costs of sudden loss in the workplace?
So there are big ramifications for both. They're really big. So I think the number is that each year the United States loses over $100 billion to grief-related absenteeism, loss of productivity, and turnover. That's a huge, huge number, and because it's estimated that each grieving employee will take up to 30 days off.
Mm.
Are you familiar with the phenomenon presenteeism?
Oh,
So
Yes.
sure.
then you've got presenteeism, people coming to us, but again, now grieving. And
Right.
so poor decisions being made, mistakes, all of that hits the bottom line of a business. But employees, I mean, the person who is grieving, there are physical
Mm,
experiences. Many people don't realize how physical grief is: headaches, stomach aches, body aches, not being able to sleep, change in appetite, problems that you had before now coming back and exasperated. It changes emotions, they become often dysregulated. So, one moment, again, in this high anxiety state, perhaps the next moment, a very depressive or sad state. Cognition, which is very important in the workplace, being able to think clearly, not remembering things,
mm,
not being able to make decisions, all of those type of things. And then it also goes into it changes how we behave. We tend to isolate, withdraw, especially if we're not feeling supported or that no one understands us. Sometimes we engage in high risk behaviors, like,
mm,
and so, well, it doesn't matter. I don't even care if I live or die, which I see all the time. So I might as
mm.
well do this or that. And then it even impacts us spiritually and our religious belief systems and existentially. And so I don't think we realize what a huge impact it has. And so your employees are your biggest asset. And if you're not supporting them well through all aspects of their life, they are not going to be able to show up and give you the best that they can. So,
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that's really fair. So, Jennifer, clearly there is such disruption and disorientation that can happen in the workplace for people that go through some type of a loss or terrible trauma, traumatic loss. What should leaders be thinking about doing? What can we do to help rebuild this psychological safety in the workplace?
one of the things that happens is, there's this acknowledgement after there's been a death, and, whether it be flowers, attending the funeral. By the way, going to an employee's funeral is like the best way you can show trust and loyalty to
Mm,
one of your employees and invest them. So having, HR show up or the CEO says so much. I care. We care. You're a person. But after 2 weeks, it's life back to normal. And
Mhm.
and so the biggest way, and I have something that's coming next year to hopefully help with the situation, is to remember that grief, there's a study by empathy.com that shows the average amount of time for grief is 10 months. I think that's incredibly underestimated, and it's
Mm,
longer. It's longer. Well, remember, I deal with sudden and unexpected. And so a lot of the individuals I work with will go on and have something called prolonged grief disorder. But so constantly acknowledging and checking in. Everybody rallies, everybody provides support immediately. What about 3 months later? What
mm,
about 6 months later? What about during the holiday party? First Christmas without
mm,
your, or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever, without a loved one is so hard. And when everybody's in this festive cheer, um, depression is the highest during the holiday season. And so remembering that, hey, this person is not okay. And one of the things I hear so much is how I am on the outside doesn't reflect on how I am on the inside. And that's
mhm,
exhausting because you have to be okay. Everybody expects it. They don't
mhm,
want to, you get condolences for a while, but after that, you know, I don't
mhm,
want to be a downer. And so if somebody says, hey, this must be a hard time for you. How are you really doing? That
mhm,
goes so far. And then there's programs and things that formal programs that workplaces can do. Many workplaces have an EAP, an employee
sure.
uh, assistance program. And let's say the death actually occurs in the office setting, which is one of the things that I on. Get the EAP, they come out the first couple days. Hardly anyone goes
Mhm,
because no got their mind around what's just happened and they're numb and everything. It's providing that support 3 months down the line. Now that we've been living with this
mhm,
conversation, how is this really showing up? And so, even making it okay to talk about it and acknowledging it, that changes the whole culture right there, you know,
Mhm.
messages. And they have to start from the top.
I'm so glad to hear you recommend that leaders or coworkers go to the funeral or the funeral home. My dad died almost 32 years ago now, and I can still remember the
mm,
people I worked with who came to see me when my dad died.
mhm,
And it was we were an hour and a half, almost 2 hours away of, the city of where I worked and where my dad was. So it wasn't like it was easy to just drop by over lunch or during a break. And, I've always remembered that, how important to me that was at the time.
beautiful.
So I
Yeah.
think that's great advice. Yeah,
Yeah. You
yeah.
felt really seen.
Mhm,
Right, right. I did. What so you talked about some of the things that organizations should do. What are some of the missteps, even if unintentional, I'm sure at many times, that organizations might make in these situations?
Yeah. So,
mm,
that's a broad question in terms of I'll first put it in the context of an employee who just went out on bereavement leave and comes back. So, one of the things they often don't do is have a depending on, who it was that died, don't have a conversation with them before they come back or as they come back. In turn, how comfortable? What do you want people to say to you? How do you want to be spoken to about that? I mean, there's this misconception that, well, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to upset them. I
Right.
guarantee you they're thinking about it anyway.
Right.
Sometimes people go back to work really quickly because it's a sense of normalcy and it's very distracting and helpful. And they might say to you, I'm really glad to be back. I need this. I need normalcy. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. People can just say, how are you doing? Or other people come back and they're just like, I am so struggling, but I worked with an executive whose daughter unfortunately took her life. And it was a complete shock, surprise. And he didn't really talk about it. And he didn't want anyone to bring it up to him. And so, kind of just having that conversation that doesn't
Yeah.
really happen? Like, and ideally, if it's not if it's, a 3-day quick leave because we don't provide a lot of time, but to reach out before that and say, "How can I help you transition back?"
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's one thing. Um, what type of accommodations? And some workplaces are getting really good at this. What kind of accommodations do you need? Do you need extra time? Do you need flexibility in your schedule? And again, depending on the workplace, this may or may not be possibility. But even just asking that,
Right.
um, one of the things I often say is never put on the grieving person to ask for what they need. So even if you're supporting somebody, not even outside of the workplace, who just had a death, call me if you need anything. No, 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 no. They're not going to.
Mhm.
95% of the time, they're not going to. Instead, would it be helpful if I picked the kids up for you? Could we bring dinner over and leave it in front of your doorstep on Friday night? Um, can my son come over and mow your lawn? And so
Whoa.
if you've just had this traumatic death, you don't even know what you need. You don't even know how you're going to get through your day. And so putting that onus on anyone is so awful. And so for HR and for leaders to say, well, just tell us what you need. So to say things like, these are some things we are able to do. What of these might be helpful to
Nice.
because I don't want to lose my job. I need my job. I don't want to be passed up for a promotion. And even saying, this is a human experience you're going through. We want to support you. And this has no impact on your work career or how we,
Right.
So acknowledging that because those are fears. What if I ask? Is this a sign of weakness? Are they going to think that I can't do my job?
Right. Right.
So having those conversations again, if something traumatic happens, just be going back to normal too soon. I hear
Mm.
so many times things like everybody else's life is moving on and they've
Mhm.
forgotten what's happened in mine. And so HR just checking in, you know, and even if it's just an email, because you don't want to bother the person or whatever. I know it's been a month since you've been back. I imagine there's been ups or downs. I am here anytime. I have not forgotten. It's like
Mm.
all you have to do. My
Beautiful.
door is open at
Yeah.
3 months. And so just, that resuming normal and we're all going back. The other thing is training. Have some training. Managers struggle so much. How do I support an grieving employee who has responsibilities? So there's training. One of the things that we do all of that at Traumatic Grief Solutions is we provide training in advance. That report I was telling you by empathy.com says 25% of your workforce is grieving at any time.
Oh.
So what for? So even if nothing isn't happening, tell them anyway. Get some training in now.
I think you've given really good practical ideas. If you are a leader of an organization listening to this episode, what does leadership need to do in order to make sure that this organization is one that, when horrible things happen and traumatic things happen, that they don't merely the employees don't survive it, but they actually come out stronger and better connected?
Yeah. So the way you do something like that is you plan ahead. It's not an if, it's a when.
Mm.
Somebody's going to have a heart attack, a stroke, an accident, whether it be at work, whether it be on vacation, whether it be, on the way home. So plan for it first, because when you make a plan in terms of, okay, what services are we going to have? Because I guarantee you that EAP for 3 days isn't enough, doesn't cut it.
Mhm.
So, okay, so what are we going to do besides that? And what resources can we have? And we have a whole proactive planning system that we do, but help leaders do that. Leadership get into training, what to say. You don't say, when my sister died, when an employee shares something and then turn it around to, I know how you feel when my sister died,
Mm.
or they're in a better place or God has a plan, and so become well versed in the language of grief. Acknowledge that it's there. A quarter of your employees are grieving right now.
What I love, this training is so good in the workplace, but every human can use it in the real life, right? Because every
Mhm.
human is going through this and it's not just confined to work. So what's what I love about this topic is we all could get better at building our own competency around helping others through trauma
Yeah.
and grief. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And how can our listeners reach out to you if they want more information or to find out more about this topic?
Well, they can reach out to me at my website, Traumatic Grief Solutions, just like it sounds, or Jennifer at Traumatic Grief Solutions. And if you're interested in the book actually has a course that comes with it, and that's great for either individual employees or anyone who's struggling with a sudden or unexpected death. The book is on Amazon, but the online course and everything you can also get at my other website, which is geared towards individuals who have experienced
Mhm.
a sudden or unexpected death. And that's called Therapy Heals. And that's THERAPY Heals, HEALS.com.
I think that's great. So, Jennifer, we do ask all of our guests before they leave us, a joy powered question. And I know this topic is a tough one. So, we're looking for joy in this. So, here's the question: what's one thing people in this area can do that can help bring joy to what can be a very difficult process?
So, after grief, you experience emotions differently. And to me, joy in this is being seen, witnessed, validated, connected, and supported. And like, we have got you, just don't worry about it. And so, employees know we are here for you for the good and bad. And there will be moments of joy again, but we're going to be with you here until then.
Ah,
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Really great information. So
Thank
thank you.
you. You.
Jody, our listener question today came from one of our listeners to one of our monthly podcasts. As always, we welcome questions from listeners. What is the best practice for reworking an executive comp program that ties to revenue for individuals' bonuses when you want a more balanced compensation that drives the right executive priority and focus in the organization?
Well, I do think bonuses drive behavior. So you have to be careful what you're asking for. I remember years ago when the company I was working for created a bonus plan. I worked in public accounting for a long time. So it was January to April 15th was a very significant time of our year. I mean, a significant portion of the revenue for the entire year was actually earned in those first 3.5 months. And one year they said, if you have X number of billable hours by April 15th, you'll get a bonus. Well, let me tell you, I don't know anyone in the 1,000 person plus firm who didn't get a bonus that year. We all met our billable hour goals. Now, some of that was because we pushed really hard to hit that amount, and we worked a lot of overtime. But I can also tell you, I would have loved to have seen the numbers on was that billable time actually all built, right? Um, because you kind of controlled your own billable hours, really. I mean, you were measuring and tracking those yourselves. And I just always wondered if every single person made it, right? That was the incentive to get the billable hours, and everybody made it. So was that, in hindsight, I just always wonder maybe there should have been some other parameters about did it really get billed? Did it really get paid? Did it, all those other things. So I think it's okay to set a partial goal based on revenue production or net income, even. or on total revenue. But I just highly recommend well defined goals. And typically, as it sounds like our listener is finding, that, that's the only thing that's being driven is the one thing the bonus is set out for. So I personally like to see an organizational wide goal, maybe based on total revenue or net income or EBITDA or whatever that is, to see team goals so that people will work together. When people are incented based on individual goals only, it becomes a I'm in it for myself type of goal, not for the team or for the organization. Or, of course, you could have a combination of all three of those goals combined. But I'm not a fan in most cases of just incenting total revenue. Now, Susan, you have a lot more experience than I do on comp plans and incentives, but do you have different thoughts on that?
I like everything you said, JoDee, and I think I'm just going to add a couple of more thoughts. One, I totally agree that reward drives behaviors. And so you've got to be really thoughtful. And I love the fact that our listener is being thoughtful here. We do, organizations generally want to grow. And if you want people to grow, you want to pay them to do things that are going to help the organization grow. So having goals, bonus goals tied to generating revenue or any of the other factors you mentioned is smart. It's going to reward is going to drive behaviors. But I do believe every organization has values. What is it that is most important to us?
Well,
Some organizations it's about being client focused. Others it's going to be about integrity. Others it's going to be who knows what. I think it's really important that your bonus that's either the filters that have to be first put on: is this person eligible or not? Do they meet living our values? Or perhaps you weight them, score them, just like you're weighing their um, revenue generation or any other factor. Are they living our values? Are they representing us in the way we want them to? So I'd be thoughtful as I build my scorecard to make sure that it is as balanced as can be. Otherwise, we get bad behaviors happening. I've seen companies where the whole bonus program was about revenue generation, and you know what? When people have one single focus, all of a sudden they start leaving some of the other values, in their rearview mirror. They are focused on attaining that. They're going to do whatever it takes, and is not the kind of environment that most organizations want.
yes, yes, agree, agree.
Long answer.
Well, now it's time for In the News. Sudoku Bliss recently surveyed Americans in 40 US cities about their lunchtime work habits. I thought this was very interesting. So, Susan, I think we can go back and forth on some of the highlights of his survey.
I first have to say I love that Sudoku did this because probably they're hoping people at lunchtime are, got their pen and paper out and they're doing Sudoku, right?
Right. That's what I thought too. So, 83% of Americans regularly scroll social media during their lunch break.
That's higher than I would have thought, but
Me
interesting.
too.
Yeah. 2 in 5 Americans regularly go for a walk or run errands on their lunch break. Love those walkers.
Yeah. 1 in 5 Americans regularly take a nap on their lunch breaks.
That's interesting. One in
Mhm.
3 Americans say they frequently feel rushed on their lunch break. I was going to think it's higher than that. I think we
Me
all feel rushed, right?
thought so too. Nearly 2 in 5 Americans say they usually stay available for work during their lunch break.
Ooh, I'm sorry to hear that. 1 in 6 Americans wish they had more flexibility to choose when they take their lunch break.
Mm. 86% of Americans say their employer encourages them to take a lunch break, but only 2 in 5 say it's a paid break.
I think that is normal. Most organizations aren't paying people for their lunch time.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Interesting
agree.
facts. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us today. If you're SHRM certified, you can get credit for listening to this episode. To get the code, go to getjoypowered.com joypowered.com/SHRM and fill out a short evaluation. When you finish the evaluation, you'll get the code and a link to a proof of participation certificate. The code will expire on December 29th, 2026. Again, that's getjoypowered.com/SHRM to get the code. And it's going to expire on 12/29/26. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your dedication to the HR profession. Please tune in next time and make it a joy-powered day.
Thank you. If you like the show, please tell a few friends about us and let us know what you thought by leaving us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. Become a Joy Powered member to get extras like early access to episodes, video versions of the episodes, bonus episodes, and even more. Learn more at patreon.com/joypowered. You spell Patreon, Patreon. So it's patreon.com/joypowered. You can find more information on our podcast, books, blogs, and more at getjoypowered.com. We're at JoyPowered on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can email us via joypowered@gmail.com. Make it a joy-powered day.